Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Modern WoW has by this point become one of those games that causes people to laugh behind your back if you still play it. From the moment it showed its ugly face, the Shadowlands expansion is nothing but a complete mockery. Keep in mind that I'm not talking about vastly downgraded gameplay, even though there is much to talk about that as well, but primarily many plot holes in the story. And not just some minor inconsistencies, mind you, I'm talking about major oversights by the writers that completely undermine the entire story segments. Complete lore of WoW has become such a convoluted mess that it would take 5 years of college to comprehend what is actually going on here. I mean, we have come to a point that every time some ridiculous new piece of the story is revealed, the comment sections and forums are filled with fans explaining how this all makes sense and that everything fits perfectly into the existing lore. Their arguments are usually backed by some obscure piece of the story that is lost to everyone except to them, I guess, or based on some pure speculation that we can't deny or confirm for that matter, because important pieces of the story are so vague it's insane. How sad to see this once beloved IP turned into this. But why touch on this subject now? It's been widely known that the story of WoW has been in a deep dive for quite some time now. There is much to be said about other abominations carrying the Warcraft's name, from expansions that are created solely on one Easter egg from Warcraft 3 to the other that sees us fighting the same enemy again. We can safely conclude that the story of WoW has been on a complete down spiral. But despite this, Shadowlands has been that one expansion that keeps me awake at night. Something about this new lore just puts me on the edge every time I see it. All the new and flashy cinematics that come out count for nothing the moment you start to comprehend their narrative. I actually went on to do some research, mind you, to understand the story of a fucking video game, to find some reason in this entire circus. Some answers took a long time to find and are nowhere near as satisfying as I had hoped, but with some help of Blizzard forums and good people posting there, I can safely say that now I am actually even more confused than I was before. So instead of getting some kind of an explanation, I instead found even more plot holes that I didn't even knew existed. So this video is strafing a little bit from my usual video game review format to this mini rant. I don't want to turn into a grandpa Alcor and constantly brag about how the things were much better in my time. I mainly wanted to showcase many problems I found with the game, and who knows, maybe someone might actually help me understand. So why don't we take a look? Ah yes, this cinematic. Everyone and their grandmother had already something to say about it, so let me also add a little bit to the trash fire. So yeah, Sylvanas just walking into Icecrown unopposed. Remember that iconic scene that plays after you kill Arthas? Of course you do. His father, who's now finally free, gives a motivational speech, and then Bulwark decides to become the next Lich King to stop the Restless Scourge from running rampant. Remember the Restless Scourge? So where is it? Is it somewhere else? Why is it not defending the only person keeping it under control? So a small vanguard at the top of Icecrown is all we get? Someone on the forum actually said this. Dude, it's a game. Hardly gonna make an hour-long trailer showing her climb to the top of the throne. Even in a make-believe world, you can't always apply what would be considered realistic logic. That in itself is pretty logical? Sorry, but no, that's not really logical. Mostly because the very reason Bulwark is at the top of the Icecrown is not present, making this upcoming fight very underwhelming. But let's say that I'm willing to let this slide, which I'm not, by the way, like, not at all, but for the sake of progression, let's do that. Sylvanas then fights and beats the Lich King Bulwark and as a prize takes his helmet, which is okay, I have no problem with that, but what is not okay is what happens next. Even after 2 years since this cinematic came out, I still have so many questions, it's unreal. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Why would the Helm of Domination, basically a prison for an orc shaman in Rezul made by Kil'jaeden, do this? The first obvious explanation is because it can rise the dead and thus serves as something of a link between the Shadowlands and our reality. That doesn't make sense, because when you think about it, necromancy is independent practice that isn't tied to the helm itself. Necromancy existed on Azeroth long before Lich King was even created. It was practiced by troll witch doctors as well as invading demons and orcs. But even after the helm's destruction, it still exists. Much smarter person than me has thought of this argument. If Kil'jaeden could create something like that, then why even bother with the Lich King in the first place? Why create the Scourge to weaken Azeroth when he could have just shattered the barrier between worlds of life and death and let whatever is on the other side to weaken Azeroth? Well, that's a very good point. And I know what you're all thinking. The Shadowlands actually revealed that the Jailer was the real master of the Lich King, which would explain Helm opening the barrier between life and death, and I would consider that if I actually approved of this insane twist. Jailer being the puppet master of not just the Lich King, but everything that has happened to this point is not only ludicrous, it's also sad. It undermines everything that has happened, including the war with the Burning Legion. I think this would be a good opportunity to take a step back. Why don't we take a look at the last mission of the Frozen Throne? Illidan and Arthas are both duking it out for the Frozen Throne. One wants to destroy it while the other wants to claim it, and we all know what happened. Arthas inevitably won and took his place as the Lich King. But taking the new knowledge into account, does that mean if Illidan had won, he would have unleashed an apocalyptic event onto the world? I mean, one of the main charms of the last mission in Warcraft 3 is that you are playing the bad guy, and I know that Illidan is no saint, but destroying the Lich King sounds a lot better than letting Arthas claim its power and thus becoming one of the strongest beings in the world. But now, it looks like Arthas saved the world by keeping the helm as his own? Even if I'm willing to believe in this absurd logic, why wouldn't Arthas just let Illidan destroy the helm? I mean, the Jailer clearly wanted to open the portal eventually, so why not just order Arthas not to intervene? How does this whole new plot fit into everything we have known for years? Well, here's a hint, it doesn't. To continue the trend of destroying the beloved lore of Warcraft 3, it appears that Jailer was not just the master of Lich King, but also of the Dreadlords, and everyone agrees for some reason. Yes, the Dreadlords are master deceivers. Why wouldn't they serve another overlord behind everyone's back, right? To fully appreciate the complete insanity that this claim is, we have to take a look at some pieces of the lore, so bear with me as I explain who exactly the Dreadlords are. The Dreadlords are basically just a bunch of incompetent buffoons who, when are not in dangerous situations, are constantly in search to be in one. They are often defeated by the lesser beings, and their talk is usually much bigger than their walk. They supposedly serve the Burning Legion, but I think that unintentional sabotage would be a better term. This cohort of heroes includes such geniuses as Veremotheres, the guy who begged to be spared the moment Sylvanas defeated him, also Mal'Ganis, the guy who was defeated by an upstart human even though he set up trap for him, and how could we forget the man, the myth, the legend, Tychondrius, one of the strongest, if not the strongest Dreadlords ever. He was so strong in fact that the Arthas had to do all the work for him in summoning the Burning Legion. Also, the moment he got just a shred of responsibility from his overlords, he made a huge military blunder and even managed to get himself killed. You mean to tell me that these jokers pulled a sneaky on all of us? A prank, if you will, deceiving not only the Burning Legion but also killed Jaden, the guy whose nickname is literally the Deceiver?
What?
You have to excuse my cynicism, but I must call a massive bullshit on this one. But putting this one concern aside, how does this explain the rivalry between them and Arthas? If all of them serve the same master, why are they fighting? For this lore to make a lick of sense, the Blizzard must have thought of this 20 years ago when Frozen Throne was still in the making, which clearly they didn't, because the story is not fitting. Ah, Sylvanas, how could I have ever forgotten about you? This Shattered Legacy cutscene is a complete joke. The author's reasoning is void of all logic and is not something he would ever say. The supposed redemption of this unredeemable character is bordering on a comedy sketch. Where do I even begin? Why not with "it wasn't her" argument? It has already been established that Sylvanas gained her free will from the time Lich King powers started to wither, as she said herself.
Lady Sylvanas, we are pleased that you came.
How could I not? For some reason, I no longer hear the Lich King's voice in my head. My will is my own once again.
So I must ask, what do you mean it wasn't her? The notorious deeds that most undead do is not really them individually acting on an order, but rather the will of a supreme mind that controls them. So if she is no longer under the influence, what exactly caused her to be evil? I always thought that the logical conclusion is that Sylvanas did gain her free will, but the trauma turned her into a monster that we all know today. You have to understand, she did more than just a simple oopsie. I don't know, destroying cities, genociding people, all the things that we might consider consider atrocious are somehow excusable because her wound runs deep, but that isn't even the main issue. I mean, since when are we making exceptions? The countless Death Knights and other spawn of the Scourge were given no regard when the main villain was standing behind them. If anything, the common foot soldier in Lich King's army is more deserving of mercy than Sylvanas ever was. They were just mind-controlled pawns, as where she is a commander with free will. It also doesn't help that Uther is saying all of this forgiveness nonsense. If memory serves, he also took his revenge on a person whose soul was consumed by Frostmourne, which led him to destroy everything he ever loved for, including Uther himself. So to preach this message is a kind of hypocritical if you ask me. One might say that he hesitated, but the act is still done. So I don't know who Uther thinks he is that he can lecture anyone on forgiveness. The game says that they need her because she knows the jailer's plans. If she knew his plans, why he would dispose of her? You know, because she could have vital information, but I don't even think that is important because at this point I don't think Jailer himself knows what his plan is. Returning to Warcraft 3, again, Sylvanas betrayed Arthas because he turned her into this undead monstrosity. But again, if Arthas was under control of the Jailer, why would she ever join forces with the same power that turned her into this person that she loathes? It doesn't make any sense. Her betrayal meant nothing if she still sided with the same force that mutilated her. But to conclude this short rant, I wanted to point out something that I was thinking about. How did Warcraft's story get so unnecessarily convoluted and bland? The main problem, in my opinion, is that the overall story must constantly mold itself around MMO template. What do I mean by this? Well, when you have the MMO structure like World of Warcraft, the first thing that comes to mind is that you must have some kind of rivalry between factions, each having multiple races to choose from. Naturally, this means that no faction can win or subjugate the other. Also, there can be no real or lasting peace between them, since how can you explain the battlegrounds? They can join forces for a while, but that can't last. Also, no race can be eradicated or switch sides like we had before, because that means that players will have to fight for the other side now and lose most of their friends they had in the old faction. We can't have too much time pass between story points because, you know, your character would naturally age and eventually retire if that ever happened. That is why the second attack of the Burning Legion took 10,000 years to happen, while for the third one it took like 10 or 20 years, because there had to be a new expansion and we ran out of good villains. Inconsistencies like these are what chokes the story to its breaking point. Of course, all the events must be on a global scale to include all the players. You can't have just some minor event on the side like you had with the Frozen Throne, where most factions are not included. That is why every expansion must be a world-ending event that every player can take part in. This list goes on and you get what I'm trying to say. A game can be made with these restrictions, but we are talking about 20 years of this storytelling. It's only natural that the story is burdened and choked because the limitations are here for so long that the lore can no longer flow in a natural way that you would expect. Maybe it's time to put this whole MMO thing and the story for that matter out of its misery. Clearly that would never happen for obvious reasons, but at this point it would be the only thing that would stop this complete mockery that we call a story. It had its run, and it was a good one, but like that one smart person once said, no king rules forever. Oh yeah, and while we are at this point, I just have a little thing to add, okay? Guys, it's been 12 years. 12 fucking years. I think that if you want to continue this whole charade, maybe it's time to finally drop Arthas for good and actually try to make new and interesting characters. I know he's the best character in the entire franchise, but the dude died in 2009. Why is he still showing up in questlines and new cinematics? It's as if motherfucker never even died. If this circus continues, Arthas will lose what makes him special. He had his story and it is finished. The Fallen Prince died and there is no need to add anything more. Please, at least, don't shit at the last piece of your legacy that is still considered good, okay? Okay.